Let the 8 weeks of MMA heaven begin. Woo! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. I'm your host, as always, Clint McClain. And this week we are headed to Houston, Texas, the Toyota Center for UFC 247. We have a Jon Jones fight card, ladies and gentlemen, and we are kicking off, like I said, 8 straight weeks of UFC action. I could not be more stoked. Let's get right into this thing. How y'all doing? How you been? Welcome back to the show. Now, I know. First thing is going to be, Clint, why are we on audio again? Well, here's the deal. I told you all in 2020 we were going to a video format, and I did not lie. However, what I did do is underestimated the amount of work and effort that will go into putting this thing on video format. I had some technical difficulties. One of the programs that I'm used to doing my editing with is not going to work these days. I actually have to learn a whole new program, and then something that I really just want to make sure I'm bringing a quality show for the diehard MMA fans out there. I didn't want to just throw some stuff on a screen and get it out to you guys. I actually want it to be a good quality product, and as time was winding down for this episode, I was going, you know what, if I do throw this video podcast together for this episode, it's not going to be good. It's not going to look good. The graphics are not going to be sharp. They're not going to be detailed, and I can't stand putting out a shoddy product. So because of that, what I'm doing is I'm pumping the brakes. We're going to stick with audio only for at least the little bit of a foreseeable future. I'm going to pick a date off down the road where there's a good, big, solid fight card and go, you know what? That'll be the one, and we will switch to video format at some point later in the year. But for now, don't worry about it. We'll stick with audio only until I am up to date and ready to go on this thing, so it's the best show that it can possibly be for you guys. As usual, I'd like to kick this show off with a couple of shout-outs. We've got new subscribers over on YouTube. We've got Rye Cape. We've got Rosenstein. We've got Kid X, who commented and let me know that he was a subscriber, and that kind of irritated me a little bit. Not you, kid, welcome to the family, but the fact that apparently people are subscribing and YouTube is not notifying me. So if I have not given you a shout out for being a new subscriber, throw a comment down in the YouTube section and I'll go ahead and read those out. I want to make sure everybody gets their moment in the sun and gets their shout out for subscribing over here to me on YouTube. I appreciate each and every one of you. We are still trying to get this train rolling. We're sitting at 424 subscribers, and I want to hit that 1,000 subscriber mark by the half year point at least. Let's see if we can get there. Do me a favor, retweet the show, comments, like, subscribe. All those things help. They get more attention and get more eyes on it. So the more people that get to the show, hopefully the more fans we bring to the table. One other thing I want to tell you about is I do content for SBR, that is sportsbookreview.com. They do the best sports betting page, basically, where you can analyze the different lines available at all the different books. They've got the best one on the internet, and I have done content for them for the last year or so. Well, they have switched things up. They have new management, and basically the only thing that matters to them is numbers. So my content has not been getting the numbers that they found. I'm not getting enough numbers. Basically, that's it. So do me a favor. If you follow me on Twitter, first off, if you don't follow me on Twitter, go follow me on Twitter at DieHardMMAPod. And then once you do follow me on Twitter, when I tweet out my articles, if you wouldn't mind hitting the link, read over the article, even if you don't spend a ton of time on it because you listen to the show, I get it. But just click the link for me and throw me a retweet, throw me a like if you would. Another huge thing that you guys could do for me is maybe share the podcast on Reddit. I know that Reddit has an absolutely massive fan base, but a big thing on Reddit is you're not allowed to do like self-promotion and things like that. People get mad at you and bite your head off for it. So if you guys wouldn't mind maybe throwing my name out there if you post or anything like that, that would be awesome to get some more eyes on the show as well. Once again, as always, I love you guys. Really, the diehards, I have the best support system when it comes to MMA handicapping on the planet. So I love each and every one of you and appreciate you for being here. Good news, we have a full episode dedicated to the UFC rally recap and the shitstorm that was, so I don't have to go over it this week. We are going to completely blow by the recap of last week's episode. Short version, so far in 2020, I suck. But we're going to go ahead and right this ship right here on this card and in the 8 weeks to come. We've got so much MMA action to bet on in the near future that it makes my eyes bleed. I cannot wait. There's going to be so many opportunities. We're going to get that cash back, I promise you. And let's dive straight on in to UFC 247. But first, I do have to give one final shout out to our boys over at GOAT Capital Sports. They are the show's first sponsor. We have to say a huge thank you to GOAT Capital Sports. Give the guys a follow over there. They did give a discount on memberships to Die Hard MMA podcast listeners. I hope some of you jumped on that. They cover all the other sports that I simply don't have the time or ability to handicap, and they know their shit. Give them a follow over on Twitter, and if you want to sign up for their service, let them know that Clint sent you. Those guys are awesome, and they'd be happy to interact with you on Twitter as well. So our first fight of the night is a featherweight fight between Austin Lingo and Youssef Zalal. Now, I'm going to be bluntly honest with you guys. This is a late thrown on fight. We lost a couple this week, and the UFC, I think, tacked this on there to try and add a little bit of length to this card because you don't want it to be like a 6-fight card or something like that. So they threw this one on there. We've got Austin Lights Out Lingo, who trains out of Fortis MMA. He is 7-0 undefeated. Fortis is based out of Texas, and they are one of the biggest, hottest up-and-coming gyms in the UFC, in MMA in general right now. And I think this is a spot where they're like, hey, we need a guy from Texas. And Fortis MMA, you are going to hear a lot on the episode tonight because they have a ton of fighters fighting this weekend. And y'all know me, if you've been with me since the beginning, that's an angle I really like. When they do these fights where it's like a camp showcase type of fights, usually those guys are getting easy matches. Usually those guys are all training together, they've game planned together, they're peaking all at the same time. To me, that's a really good sign. When you've got a fighter that's training with somebody who's peaking maybe 2 weeks down the road or something like that, you're not quite matched up with your camps. You're not on the same wavelength as far as what needs to get done. All these guys are fighting on the exact same night. They are all going to be ready to go, guns blazing, hard sparring, all at the same time. So I think that is a good sign. Now, I didn't have time to look into this fight because I was not prepared for this one to be added on the card before the podcast. So Austin Lingo, undefeated, trains out of Fortis MMA, definitely somebody that you want to take a look at. I mean, he's, like I said, he's undefeated, he's out of a good camp, we know that. He's facing Youssef Zalal, who's 7-2, which not necessarily a bad record, but he just bounced back off of a 2-fight skid. He does train out of Factory X, so not a bad gym in and of itself, but still, it almost seems like this kid's getting set up here a little bit. I don't have anything to say as far as line value, anything like that. Unfortunately, I'm just going to kind of throw a dart at this one. I will not be betting this fight. I will probably tape it over the next couple of days, and y'all know me. If I feel like there's a bet there, I will make a bet and I'll throw it out there on Twitter so it gets added to the official record. But the pick has got to be Austin Lingo. Like I said, coming from the good camp, everybody's getting ready from there. You got to feel like this is a spot where they're wanting to highlight Fortis as a camp on this night. So I'm going to say Austin Lingo gets the fight, but that is really pulling a pick out of my ass. I have no idea who wins this thing, and I don't even really know what the skill sets of these two fighters are. Our second fight of the night is a bantamweight tilt between Andre the Highlight Ewell taking on Jonathan Martinez. Andre Ewell is 15-6. He's taking on Jonathan Dragon Martinez, who is 11-2. And this is a spot where okay, first off, full disclosure. This is a very, very hard fight card. So if anybody comes at you and they're like, oh, I love this card, I've got so much action, I would pump the brakes real quick. I've been staring at these fights long and hard, and I've done a whole lot of tape study for them, and I'm having a very difficult time finding spots that I like because a lot of these fights are lined very, very closely, and it's because a lot of these finds are really razor thin. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if any of these guys pulled the win off on any given fight on this particular card. Let's start with Andre Ewell. He's tall, he's long, he's athletic, athletic, he is fast, and I don't like his face. I don't know what it is, but I'm just not sold on Andre the Highlight Ewell. I never have been. If you guys heard me talk about his last couple fights over the last year or so, I am just not sold on this kid being UFC level. So he steps in the UFC in 2018 and he squeaks out a decision over the shell, the ghost of Renan Barão. That means nothing these days. In 2018, it kind of raised an eyebrow and you're like, oh man, how far has Renan Barão fallen? But now that we're on the other side of it, I can kind of flip it and be like, dude, you barely got by Renan Barão. So he gets submitted by Nathaniel Wood. He takes on Anderson Dos Santos in 2019, wins a decision, and then he gets thrown to Marlon Chito Vera, who TKOs him in round 3. It was a pretty good fight up until that point, but I mean, basically, we've only seen him beat the bottom tier, and then when he takes that step up against good, solid competition, he's not only getting beat, he's getting finished. So, like I said, athletic and fast, he stays at range, he does do a good job of closing that distance quickly when he's ready to strike and be at a closer range. He does have good head movement, I will give him that. However, one thing I've noticed is that he overextends on his punches. His left hand is an absolute piston. That thing is fast as hell, and he does throw good short right check hooks, but he does give up takedowns late. It almost seems like with this kind of a skinny fighter build, you don't normally see gas tank issues, but in kind of the late rounds, it almost seems like he's gassing out. He really starts giving up takedowns much, much easier. He's more of a point fighter. He kind of has to volume people. He doesn't have all that much power, and I find that odd for a guy named The Highlight, because these days his highlight reel isn't all that impressive. He's barely getting by these guys. He got TKO'd only 3 months ago in that Marlon Vera fight, and that's something that we always find concerning here on the podcast. When you're getting thrown into another fight that quickly, your brain might still be a little bit rattled. Now, he's got a 75-inch reach, and he averages 3.32 significant strikes per minute, but he absorbs 3.83. So on average in the UFC so far, he has been outlanded by his opponents. It's very thin. It's a close margin, half a strike per minute, basically, a significant strike that is, but it's still something. You don't want to be running even with your opponents in significant strikes. You just never want to be in that spot. Jonathan Martinez on the flip side of this thing, this kid seems like he might be legit. So he's got absolutely sick Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and one thing I noticed is he transitions to the back very, very well. He's got a good guard from bottom, he's heavy on the feet, he stalks his opponents down, and one thing he does is he jumps on guillotines. He's very confident in that attack. He's got excellent reversal timing. That's something I noticed on the ground. He really explodes well and is able to move his opponents around jiu-jitsu style. I am very impressed with this guy's ground game. He's got elusive, good head movement. He's hard to hit. He works the legs and the body with kicks, and he always wants to control the center of the octagon. Now, he is at a reach disadvantage. Andre Ewell is almost always going to have that locked up. Martinez has a 70-inch reach. However, he averages 3.42 significant strikes per minute. He only absorbs 2.8 significant strikes per minute. So that's more of where you want to be. So he is averaging just a little bit more significant strikes per minute than Andre is, and then he's receiving far less. Now, he's only been in the UFC for 3 fights, so Andre does have a full fight on him. He lost a decision to Andre Sukumtath for his UFC debut and bounced back against Wuli Jiborin and Ping Wong Lu, both relatively impressively. Now, that Ping Wong Lu fight, he seemed like he was kind of losing it. He may have been down on the judges' scorecards, or it was very close on the judges' scorecards before he landed that bomb of a knee in the 3rd round. And that's one where I'm not sure if we can credit Jonathan with the knee. I'm not sure if he's the one that should get the nod for that knee. It seemed like almost a timing thing. You know how sometimes the shots come and you're like, he kind of fell into that. Like, the guy ducks his head just at the wrong time and gets clipped. It wasn't really so much that Jonathan set up the knee and timed it perfectly as the guy dipped his head down right as Jonathan went, I'll throw one of these and see what happens. And it landed. So I'm not completely sold on that. As far as this matchup goes, Jonathan, I think, is, like I said, he's going to control the center of the octagon. He's going to try and stalk Andre Ewell. He might have a hard time closing that distance and landing once it hits the mat, if it does. I do think Jonathan's going to have the grappling advantage. However, he is okay with working off of his back. And because of that, that gives me a bit of a problem. Andre is okay on top, but he has lost by submission 3 times. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is a very, very tough fight to call, and it's lined appropriately. So we've got it right now at almost a straight pick'em. You can get Jonathan Martinez at even money, and Andre Ewell is a slight favorite at -120. Now, I believe that Jonathan Martinez opened up as a much larger dog, and he has been bet down to this point. And I would essentially agree with that line movement. If you got in on Jonathan Martinez early, then I would love that dog shot. That's something that I would totally agree with. But I don't necessarily like it at this point. I feel like all the value has been beaten out of that line. Everybody that got on it early absolutely got on it correctly and deserves to have that big, fat, juicy dog number. But I can't justify taking an even money spot on this kind of a thing. I'm not sure if he actually gets it done is the problem. Like I said, I see a path to victory for Andre Ewell as much as I don't like this guy. He opened up at -190 and is now closing at -120. You could have got Jonathan Martinez on the opener at +165, but obviously that got smashed early and was down to about +125 almost immediately. So yeah, unfortunately, this is a fight that I'm simply going to have to take a pass on. The totals aren't out for us this week, so I can't comment on those, but this is one that I would expect to go the distance, and I would expect it to be a pretty easy decision. Yeah, looking over at 5 dimes, the fight goes 3-round distance is -210. Ewell, unless he gets caught in some kind of a submission, he seems to have a good chin, so I don't know that he's going to get knocked out. Like I said, I kind of feel like that Martinez knockout was a little bit lucky, but he has knocked out guys before, so I don't know. I don't have a good enough feel on this one. I guess the pick is going to be Jonathan Martinez, but last week I thought a whole bunch of underdogs were going to show up, and it was favorites all day. So not putting a penny on this one at this point in time. I'm not making a bet, but for picks, if we're just going to say which one do you like, gun to my head, I'll take Jonathan Martinez. Our next fight is going to be a bantamweight matchup between Domingo Pilarte taking on Journey Newson. Both of these guys are 8-2. Domingo Pilarte is the son of fire. He's 30 years old, and Journey Newson is also 30. So when it comes to stats, they are virtually identical. Shout back to Goldie, who used to work with Joe Rogan on the UFC pay-per-views. So one thing about Domingo Pilarte I noticed immediately is he has very good head movement. However, he keeps his hands low. That's one of those things I feel like it's almost Anderson Silva style. He wants to bait you in to some kind of a matchup where he can use that head movement and then land shots where you don't see him coming. He does have very, very fast hands. He fights well at range. One thing I liked is his uppercut. He has a very good uppercut. He throws long hooks when it hits the mat. He scrambles very well. He's got very good guard passes and passes to side control. He's got excellent back takes. He's always looking to advance position when he gets on the mat. However, I noticed he can be controlled up against the fence. He does also back his way up to the cage, which is something when someone's got a weakness against the fence, you don't want to see them put themselves in those kinds of positions. And I do see in some of his fights where he is okay with giving up the center of the octagon and moving backwards. He's brand new to the UFC, basically. He was off of Dana White's Contender Series where he won via submission. He got into the UFC and lost a split to Felipe Diaz-Corrales. So this is really going to be that fight that we talk about with these Contender Series guys. I expect a lot of them to lose that first fight and then start to get on track and move things the right direction after that. So he's falling in that category of he got that fade spot out of the way, he got that loss out of the way. Let's see how he bounces back. Now, similarly, Journey Newson. Oh, I apologize. It looks like he's 9-2 rather than 8-2. Sorry about that. He is not coming off the Contender Series, but he got his UFC shot against Ricardo Ramos and dropped it. So both these guys are coming off of a UFC debut loss. He covers up really well and then returns fire. He's got a good guard, and then he just rips it back at his opponents. He's very composed in there. He circles well. He allows his opponents to dictate the pace, however, which is something, again, I would prefer he dictate the pace, but he blitzes in, absolutely rushes forward, and he's dangerous when he does that, but he leaves his chin open for counters. He also has fast hands. I noticed he has very good precision, though. His accuracy with his punches is excellent, and he has absolute knockout power in that right cross. The thing that I want to note on him is that he's actually got a lot of amateur experience. He's got like 8 amateur fights. I think he went 6-2 amateurs or something like that. So when you look at these two guys and their young MMA careers, Journey Newson has a leg up in the experience. And I'm not sure, once again, how I feel about that. I also think that taking on a guy like Ricardo Ramos and taking him to a full 15-minute decision, that is a much deeper level of competition than his opponent Domingo Pilarte had. So I have to give the edge ever so slightly here to Journey Newson, but I again don't feel comfortable enough in this guy to fire off a bet. Both these guys are coming off of a loss. The line is essentially a pick'em. You can get Newsom at plus 110. Domingo Pilarte is minus 126. We've got a reverse line movement situation here where Domingo opened up at minus 140. 52% of the bets have come in on him, and somehow that line has gotten shorter. So it seems like the reverse line movement on Journey Newsom kind of solidifies what I'm saying here. He's plus 100, plus 110. I mean, he's about even money. This line might even flip. So I don't trust this one. I don't know enough really about either guy to trust them with my money. I made the mistake last week of throwing money at every single underdog that I thought was live, but these lines are so tight. They're so close. Unless I've got something in my brain, unless I see a very specific available path to victory, I'm not going to put my money on coin flips anymore, because that's something, and this, you know what, I know I said I wasn't going to talk about last week's card, but I thought about this throughout the week, and it kind of burned me with shame. Is I talked last year about how we learned that lesson. There were a couple of cards where I went a little wild, and I saw spots where, if you're flipping a coin, you're getting plus 120 on that coin. Take that coin flip, because eventually you're going to show a profit. It's 50-50. If you're getting the juice, you're going to come out on top. But it's not always, I just don't need to live my life that way. I don't need to put everybody in front of the oncoming train when it's a razor thin margin. So like if I think that Journey Newsom is going to win this fight, but it's really close and I don't have a really good reason why, I just think he's going to win, I don't need to bet him at plus 100. You know what I mean? And that's the kind of spot that this is. I do think Journey Newsom will win. However, this is a close fight. Domingo Pilarte is a very skilled fighter, and he very easily could win this matchup. Since I don't have a total to talk about, the pick is Journey Newsom, but we're going to have to take another pass, unfortunately. Our next fight is again at bantamweight, where Miles Johns takes on Mario Bautista. Now, Miles Chapo Johns is an undefeated 10-0 fighter. He trains out of Fortis MMA. He's one of our boys, and he is undefeated 10-0, coming off of Dana White's Contender Series, the third season. He had his UFC debut against Cole Smith and won that thing via split decision. Very close, uncomfortable fight. I want to say we bet the Cole train in that fight and were very pissed off about the split decision loss. It was close. That was back in September of 2019. He takes on Mario Bautista, who trains out of the MMA lab here in my hometown of Phoenix, Arizona, and he is 26 years old, 7-1. His lone loss coming to future title contender Corey Sandhagen, who we all know about and are very, very excited about. Now, let's go back to Miles Johns. One thing, the very first thing I noticed about Miles Johns is that he gives up his back easily. He's very confident in his ability to defend his opponents being on his back, but he turns his back all the time when he gets up and stands up. He does, however, have very, very intelligent fight IQ, very high fight IQ. When he had his back taken by Cole Smith, he had the wherewithal to walk all the way across the cage and get in a position where he could talk to his corner and take his opponent away from his corner so that he could get out of a bad position. That's not something you see a whole lot, and it's something that I like to look for. That means he's a thinker. He's a absolute sharp on his toes type of fighter. He has an explosive double leg, great footwork, very light on his feet, and he's a little tank. He has heavy, heavy top control, and he's got heavy hands. He's basically your classic wrestle boxer. He looks to threaten with the takedown. He can stand on the feet. He's developed that power, very muscular, very explosive, and you're never safe because as soon as he has his opportunity, he will blast in on a double and put you on your ass. Mario Bautista, like I said, training out of the MMA lab, so you got to feel like he's getting plenty of grappling experience over there himself. He transitions and rolls really, really well. He lost a scramble fest to Corey Sandhagen, and that's not surprising, but he looked good in the middle of it. He's got very good submission defense. He's got heavy forward pressure. He also has fast hands. He likes to wing hooks, and he's got a good step-in clinch knee. He does look for submissions. He uses them to sweep and reverse position, but he can get controlled against the fence. And this is a spot where I feel like I'm actually willing to go ahead and pull the trigger here, because Miles Johns was a very, very big favorite. He opened up at minus 180, minus 170, somewhere in that ballpark. Let me pull that up and tell you what the actual number was. So he opened up at minus 245. So Mario Bautista got absolutely blasted as a plus 175 underdog, which that I can understand. I feel like that line is way wide, but it looks like the line is starting to correct itself. Money is coming back the other way, and money is starting to come in on Miles Johns, which I agree with. Again, like I said, we are looking at Fortis MMA. We're probably going to rock with a whole lot of Fortis MMA fighters, and even though he does give up his back, like I said, he's got good submission defense, and I think he will be able to control himself, get back up on his feet if he needs to, that kind of a thing. And I think he's just going to be able to control Mario Bautista. Bautista is going to be the taller, rangier type of fighter here, and when he does throw some of these type of long looping shots, it's just going to open up opportunities for Miles to put him on his back. I think this is the kind of situation where Miles Johns is going to be able to lock up 1 or 2 rounds early with that takedown offense. I think he'll be able to keep Mario on the mat, and if he can't keep him on the mat when he's on the feet, he's no fish out of water. This dude's got hands, and I think he's going to have a decided speed advantage in this particular fight. Right now, we can get Miles Johns at minus 125. That's where we're going to take him. I think that's the best this line is going to get. I expect money to pour in on Miles Johns the other direction, and I think he's going to be a much bigger favorite by the time the fight actually kicks off. So we're going to go ahead and lay the wood with Miles Johns. He's one of these guys coming off coming off of Dana White's Contender Series. I know I've said I feel like these guys are a fade, but even though it was close, he passed his first test against Cole Smith. He's getting another young, relatively untested fighter who's new to the UFC as well, and I just think it's a good matchup for him. So we'll rock with Miles Johns, minus 125. Our next fight, we move up to welterweight, where Alex, the Great White Morono, is taking on late short notice replacement and UFC comer Kalinn, Chaos the Ox Fighter Williams, which, dude, can we just talk about that name? Chaos, spelled with a K, like Mortal Kombat, Chaos the Ox Fighter Williams. Wow, who came up with that one? Okay, this guy looks exactly like every MMA fighter you have ever seen in any action movie. If you've watched a martial arts Jet Li movie, something like that, and they bring in the mean, angry-faced black mixed martial arts fighter, that's this guy. It's exactly what he looks like. You wait and see. Wait until you see this guy when he's in the cage making faces at Alex Morono. I had to laugh because he's so, on point for Hollywood's definition of what a mean UFC fighter should look like. So Alex the Great White Morono, I'm such a fan of this dude. I think he is highly, highly underrated. He trains out of his own little gym, but he cross-trains over with Fortis MMA, which, again, he's one of our boys in this situation. Good, solid training program. He works with Geoff Neal. He works with Uriah Hall, Superman Span. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and he's a pressure fighter. He puts it on his opponents, and he's one of these guys that he is so comfortable with his ground game, his ability to submit and sweep people because of that Jiu-Jitsu black belt, that he's willing to put himself in the fire because he doesn't care if it hits the ground. And I like that kind of offense. He has very good footwork. He's very light on his feet. He's got really good in and out movement, so he's kind of hard to hit. And he always works behind his jab. He's got very good striking defense, and he attacks from his back once it does hit the mat. He's always looking for chokes, always looking for sweeps. He locks up chokes and offensive submissions to use those as reversals. And he also moves towards the back. He always tries to take his opponent's back and backpacks people really well. He's got excellent guard passes when he is on top, and he has crazy ground and pound. When he throws elbows with his ground and pound, oh, you are in for a short night if Morono's on top of you raining down elbows. He actually has a pretty solid chin too. He has been tested in that area, and his chin has held up. He's only been knocked out one time, and that was quite some time ago, all the way back in 2014. He can sometimes be coaxed into a brawl, and it makes him a very entertaining fighter to watch. It's not necessarily something you want to see all the time when you're betting on a fighter. If he can't out-technique you, he forces it into a brawl. And that's something that I do like. So I know I just kind of contradicted myself there, but if someone brawls always, it's not necessarily the best thing to bet on that kind of a fighter. If a fighter can actually go, okay, look, I'm not going to beat this guy toe-to-toe, let's make it ugly, that I want to bet on, and that's what Alex Morono does. If he realizes that he's at a technique disadvantage, he will absolutely go balls out, looking for something, looking for a finish, putting himself in the way of harm so that he can get that win, and I want that when I'm putting my money on somebody. And when he had his last fight with Max Payne Griffin, it went to decision, but he needed just 10 more seconds in the second round. He had Max absolutely rocked. Max was not in a good spot, and he got saved by the bell in round 2. I think if Morono had 5 or 10 more seconds in that round, he would have put him out stiff. Now, flipping over this thing, let's talk about Chaos for a second, why don't we? He's 9-1, he's 25 years old, and he is a big 170. I will give him that. He does have a very, very mean face, and he reminds me of Clubber Lang from like Rocky 3. He's strong, a big physical dude. He's got a really strong get-up game. It's hard to hold him down. He's got good, strong hips, and he's got heavy hands. He is primarily a striker with his hands. He's got a boxing background, and he wings big hooks. However, he does not move his head. He is there to be hit. He absolutely drops bombs when striking, and you know what? He drops his hands. When he looks for these big, heavy shots, he throws everything into them, and he leaves his chin wide open, straight up in the air, no guard. He is 100% thinking offense, knock my opponent out, no defense whatsoever. He does have good ground and pound. When he gets on top of people, he is heavy. He is very scary if he gets on top of you and locks you down. However, he does leave space. So if something should go wrong in this fight with Alex Morono, I think Alex will be able to put that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt to work, and a guy like Chaos is going to leave holes and openings for Alex to sweep, to make space, to get back to his feet, really whatever he wants with the level of ground game that Alex has. And the one thing that I really looked at on this one is Chaos's combined opponents' records is 33-39. He has been fighting cherry-picked, hand-picked bums. So yes, he is 9-1. That's the kind of record you want to look for entering the UFC. But 33-39. He's got his opponents have a losing record overall, and his last 2-3 wins, they were against trash cans. So basically, I think Alex Morono is better absolutely everywhere on this one. And if you follow me on Twitter, which you should be at diehard MMA Pod, get your ass over there if you're not already following me. You know that Alex Morono is the first early play that I tweeted out. However, we are using him in a parlay. So he is the pick, Alex the Great White Morono. I think he gets the win here. And I'm using him in a parlay because, first off, I don't like to lay that kind of big wood. I think he is the kind of fighter, this is the kind of position where you can lay that kind of big wood. I very much considered taking him on some kind of a prop bet, but really, I can see Alex winning this fight almost any way he chooses, and that's really what forced me to put him in the parlay. You can get Alex Morono inside the distance at plus 180, and I actually think that's relatively likely. I think he can probably lock up a submission on this guy. However, I do think that Chaos being the bigger fighter, he might end up proving to be more durable, and Alex might have to squeak out some kind of a decision win, because if he can't get him on the ground, he's going to have to submit from his back with his opponent being on top of him. He may not want that. If he can't land a flush shot, Chaos does have a chin, so he might not be able to put him out cold, which means he might just be able to pick him apart on the feet for 3 rounds, having a speed advantage and being able to out-finesse this guy. So I don't want to end up on the wrong side of a prop bet. We're going to parlay him, lock up Alex Morono as the winning bet. Right now, you can get him at about minus 275, looks like the lowest you can get him. I think he was about minus 260 when I actually made the play myself, so we're getting a slightly better line on there. We did beat that line move, which is why I tweet those out when I think a line is going to move against us. So pats on the back there. If you tailed and you locked that one up, we already did our job. We already beat that line move, and that's the best we can hope for. Now it's all up to our boy, the Great White, to put a winning performance together. Moving right along, we have got a women's flyweight fight between Lauren Lucky Murphy and Andrea KGB Lee. This is a fun fight. So Lucky Lauren Murphy is 11-4. She is 36 years old, and she also trains out of the MMA lab. She has been a very unique situation in the UFC, I'd say. She's one of these fighters who she's kind of got all the basic skill sets, but she's just not quite putting it together. She bounces back and forth, win-loss, win-loss, win-loss since being up at the top level. But then she comes out of nowhere and ruins my night when I picked Mara Romero Barella back in August, and she flatlines her in round 3. Lauren Murphy is an absolute tank. She has very basic striking. She wades in. She's durable. She wings big shots. She's got a slow, plodding pace, but she hits hard. She is physically strong. She's big, and she has a good clinch against the cage type of game plan. And she's very hard to take down. She has a 67-inch reach. She averages 3.53 significant strikes per minute, and she absorbs 3.59. So she is just barely, ever so slightly, being outstruck by her opponents. But she fought women like Sijara Eubanks, Katlyn Chookagian, Liz Carmouche, Sarah McMahon. I mean, she's got some decent names, and those are her losses. She beat Barb Honchak. She beat Mara Romero Barilla, which that was a close back and forth fight until she took over. So another one of those situations where she's kind of beating the lower tier. Except for that last fight, I assumed that Mara was a tier above her until she proved me wrong. Almost got to wonder if Mara had a bad night that night, because I still think I would have bet her. I still think I would pick her in a rematch. But KGB, on the flip side of this thing, is one of my favorite up-and-coming women's fighters. She is 30 years old. She is 11-3, and she is adorable. She wears the cowboy hat and the whole thing, and she's just got this sweet Texas girl smile. She is going to be the spotlight for this Texas card because she's the cowgirl. She's going to be right at home in Texas and have the crowd behind her. She has a high guard. She protects her chin very well. She's athletic. She's got fast hands, and she hits like a truck. She sits down on her punches and has heavy hands. She has the good ability to get up once she does get taken down. She's very strong in the clinch, and she has excellent knees from that position. She does attack with she attacks with really good body shots. She absolutely rips to the body with hooks. She utilizes trip takedowns really well when she gets her opponents off balance in the clinch, and she's got very strong top control. She's got excellent ground and pound, and especially when she goes to the elbows, those things are hellish when she gets on top of you, especially from side control. She's got a 69-inch reach, so she's going to have a 2-inch reach advantage here. She averages 5.03 significant strikes per minute, and she only absorbs 3.42. So that's more of what you want to see. She is landing a strike and a half significant strikes more than her opponents in general every single minute. And her UFC tenure is Veronica Macedo, who is, in my opinion, very underrated. Ashley Evans-Smith, Montana De La Rosa, and she lost a close, hairy split decision to my girl JoJo Callerwood back in September. And JoJo is, in my opinion, the dark horse of the division. She's the one who gets no respect and shows up with regularity against the upper tier when people just don't expect her to be there. She is way better than people give her credit for. So a split decision, close fight with a fighter like JoJo, to me, speaks volumes of where Andrea KGB Lee is at. Now, based on everything I just said, as you would expect, Andrea Lee is a sizable favorite. She's sitting at about minus 340 in the low spots right now. She's as high as minus 365. She opened up at minus 360, so the market's kind of unsure about whether or not this line is too wide. Some spots money is coming in on her, some spots money is coming against her. And if you recall, we set up a parlay on that last fight with my boy Alex the Great White Morono. We are closing that parlay with Andrea KGB Lee, because these are the exact same reasons why we're parlaying Morono. I expect her to win this fight, and I feel like she could get it done almost any way she wants to. She can out-volume Murphy on the feet. She's got an excellent chin, so even though Murphy does have some power, I don't think that she's going to be able to knock her out. If this thing hits the mat, I think that Andrea Lee is going to be the better fighter there. I just think she's really better everywhere, and then physically speaking, I do think she'll be able to match Lauren Murphy for strength, for the ability to work in the clinch, and I just think Andrea KGB Lee has more techniques available to her. She's going to outclass Lauren Murphy, and whether or not the finish comes, I want to make sure I'm on the right side of that fight. So something I talked with one of my diehards about a while back is that every time I look for a parlay, I want even money. I want plus money. I always want to have that plus dog money whenever I make a bet. That's always what I'm trying to look for. However, I have missed out on some units because I haven't made parlays, because I don't want to lay juice. I don't want to parlay two favorites together. Like we talked about, laying giant wood with favorites is a good way to go broke in MMA because underdogs show up. You can never count anybody out in the sport of mixed martial arts. So I have always avoided making parlays where I've had to lay juice. So if I'm going to parlay two people together and it comes out to minus 115 or minus 120, I have always just avoided that spot or found somebody else to parlay with to make sure the price is where I want it to be. I'm kind of bending that rule, and we're going to see how it goes over the next year or so on the Die Hard MMA podcast, because it's not something I'm used to doing. This parlay is going to give us a payout of minus 125. I guess the lines have kind of flipped. Morono's gotten a little worse, KGB's gotten a little better, so it probably is right around the same spot right now, even though both lines have moved just a little bit. I expect both these fighters to come through. And because of that, I think we've got a good solid shot at this parlay here, and I'm okay with laying minus 125 instead of getting even plus 100. Obviously, I'd like that a little bit more. But we are going to go ahead and make this a 2-unit play. I really see both of these fighters coming through. I see both of them getting it done relatively handily, and because of that, I'm going to go ahead and risk 2.5 units to win 2. The pick on this fight is Andrea KGB Lee. The play is a parlay Alex Morono with KGB at minus 125, and we are risking 2.5 on that one, a 2 times play. Let's get this thing back on track, baby. Let's go. The next fight is one that I am very interested in. We have got a middleweight scrap between Trevin the Problem Giles and Antonio Arroyo. This one is so stinking interesting, and I've been going back and forth on this thing for a couple of days now. So Trevin the Problem Giles, first and foremost, is a bed shitter. This guy is on the bad fight IQ, do not bet list. He's in the trash bin, and therein lies my problem. So let's break down his style a little bit, okay? He's 27 years old, he's 11-2, and he's currently riding a 2-fight win streak. He was undefeated before he came back to the UFC in 2019 after a nice long layoff to become a cop and start a family. So all great things, we wish well for him. However, it seems to have derailed his MMA career a decent bit. He's athletic, he's got very good boxing, very good hands, he's got a long, stiff jab, and he controls the range of his opponents well early. He seems to figure out that space and range game almost right away. He's very elusive, he's got good head movement, he's got good submission defense for the most part, and he is able to, here's where the bed shitting comes in. He gets reversed on the mat a whole lot, and he gasses out in round 3. He's got a great gas tank until he gets tired, and then his IQ and his gas tank both go to hell. He has really bad decision-making skills inside the cage, and that's the reason he's in the trash bin, is his bad fight IQ. So against Zach Cummings in 2019, he's basically dominating that fight. I mean, it's close, but he's winning that fight. And then he gets clipped by Zach in the 3rd round. So you get rocked, you get put on the mat with a guy who's a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, and you get choked out. Okay, I can forgive that. Zach's been around a long time. He's tough as nails. He's got heavy hands, and he's got slick Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I can forgive that. He comes back, and he gets just gifted a fight in Gerald Meerschaert. This is a spot where the UFC is screaming, we want Trevin Giles to get a W. And he goes in there against Gerald Meerschaert and makes every mistake you could possibly guess. He doesn't strike with the guy who he's got a phenomenal striking advantage over, and he decides to grapple with him. And just round after round, he takes Mirsad down. He puts Mirsad in the one place in the world in that fight that he has got a shot. And I almost got to wonder if it wasn't just kind of a balls type of move. If he was just like, hey, I want to show you I can beat you at your own game, kind of John Jones style. That's almost what it felt like, because every time he had an opportunity to split, every time he had an opportunity to make space, it was there. He had no issues, no problems making that space and getting back up to his feet and forcing Gerald Mirsad to get up and stand with him where he probably would have knocked him out clean. But instead, he just kept on volunteering to go back down on the mat, and he got choked out in round 3. At the very end of the fight, he just went ahead and let himself get locked up in a submission, and it just didn't need to happen that way. So that's why he's been put in the dumpster. That's why I've said I'm not betting on this guy again, and now I'm sitting here rethinking all of that. So Antonio Arroyo is a physical specimen. This dude is 30 years old. He's 9-3. He comes off of Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. He had a submission win on that episode, and then he fought Andre Muniz in his first UFC fight back in November. So it's a pretty quick turnaround for him, and Muniz is a pure grappler. It's one of those things where I think I talked about this one. I think I picked Arroyo to win that fight. We may have even bet him, but it was a matter of who was going to instigate their game plan. I thought Arroyo would be able to keep it standing where he had a clear advantage, and he wasn't able to do that. Andre was able to take him down and grind on him, and even though Antonio's got a lot of submissions on his record, he wasn't able to lock one up in that fight. He was outclassed on the ground. Like I said, though, he is a physical specimen. His body, he reminds me a lot of like Luke Rockhold. He's like a Brazilian Luke Rockhold, the way he moves and the way he looks. He has explosive kicks. That's the big thing. His kicking game is legit. He's got heavy leg kicks. He works the legs. He works the body. He is really light on his feet for such a big dude, and he's a massive 185er. He does use his butterfly guard very well. When it hits the ground, I noticed he's always looking for butterfly hooks. He used them to elevate his opponent's hips and sweep and get space, get back up to his feet. If he does end up on top, he has a very good top game. He's got good submission offense. He's got good ground and pound. Anytime you've got this guy on top of you, it is probably a problem. So this is another one of these very closely lined fights, and I am just so tempted on this one. I'm trying to kind of talk myself out of making a play on this one. So Trevin Giles opened up as a sizable favorite, minus 185, 190, and Alex Arroyo has been bet down. Let me go ahead and get this line up so I can tell you exactly what we're talking about here. So Trevin Giles opened up minus 195, and now he's sitting about minus 130-ish. Antonio Arroyo opened up at plus 155, and he's been beat down to plus 110, which again, I kind of agree with that line move. I feel like it's a little bit wide, but I think Trevin Giles, this is his fight to lose. I'm going to go ahead and pick Trevin Giles to win this fight. I think this is a spot where he's got to get his shit together. Like I said, he shit the bed a couple of times. He's made a couple of poor choices, but if you want to be in the UFC, if you want to keep cashing those checks and maybe not have to be a cop, you know, for your main source of income, you can do that as a retirement gig or after you're done fighting, that kind of thing. But if you want to stick around in the UFC and cash those big checks every now and again, he's got to put it together for this fight. And I think the answer is in the grappling and the gas tank. He's going to be slightly smaller. However, he's going to be able to contend on the feet with the range game. He's got long, rangy arms, and his hands are good. Antonio Arroyo is going to give him problems with the kicks, but I think Giles is athletic enough to catch some of those kicks and then put Arroyo on the mat. If he's able to put Arroyo on his back, he will be able to ride out on top and stay safe more than likely. However, I thought that against a guy like Gerald Mirsad. Now, Arroyo does not have the ground game that guys like Mirsad or Cummins have, so I don't think he's going to be quite as much as a submission threat. However, he is a much more real standing threat. With those leg kicks, with his ability to strike, his athleticism, his size, he will be a problem on the feet. So this is where I kind of want to flip it and go, last time I was trailing Trevin Giles, stand with him, stand. But if he uses that grappling game that he used last time against Mirsad, he should win this fight relatively easily. He'll probably get Arroyo to gas. He'll be able to ride this thing out on top and either win a convincing decision or maybe even TKO the guy. But I have no way of trusting Trevin Giles at this point. The game plan was outlined for him. It was easy. It was clear as day last time, and he refused to follow that game plan. Instead, he did the worst case scenario for him, and he paid for it. So as much as I really want to put a bet on Trevin Giles here, I cannot in good faith trust him. I'm probably going to look back next week and go, son of a bitch, that was the easiest play on the card. Of course he won that fight. It was handpicked for him. But that's what I said about Gerald Meerschaert, so I can't do it. We're going to pass on it. The pick is Trevin Giles. I think he gets it done. That brings us on over to the main card, and I don't know if this one's worth it. I'm a huge MMA nerd. I'm a huge UFC fan, and this is a very, very strange main card, and I just don't know if it's got the punch for $60. This is one that I'm a little skeptical of, even, and that's kind of sad to say, even with 2 title fights on the card, that somehow this is not worthy of that kind of a payout. But it's a little thin up here. So we're getting the night started right, though. We've got a heavyweight fight between Derrick Lewis and Ilir Latifi. This is one where Derrick Lewis is well-known, hometown boy in Texas. They love this guy. Everyone loves this guy. Hot balls. We all want to hear him get on the microphone and see what shit he is going to say next. Also, if you haven't already, follow him on social media. He's always posting funny, fucked up videos and stuff. It's great. He's surprisingly athletic for how big of a boy he is. He barely makes it to that 265-pound limit. He's 6'3". He's 34 years old. So as a heavyweight, he's still got a decent amount of life ahead in his career. And he bounced back well against Blagoy Ivanov after a 2-fight skid to champion Daniel Cormier Jr. dos Santos. He also seems to be taking his strength and conditioning a little bit more seriously. He didn't have quite as much of a gut on him last time. And even though it was a split decision with Blagoy Ivanov, I really think he did deserve to win that one. The one thing with Derrick Lewis that you got to watch out for is he always fights at a slow pace. He explodes, and out of nowhere he'll throw like a flying knee or something that you're like, how the hell does a man that size throw a flying knee? But he'll do it. However, he'll lull you into a very, very slow sense of security for about 3 minutes before he pops off with that flying knee. The biggest thing that I like about Derrick Lewis is he basically gets up whenever he wants. If you take this guy down, he will sit, he will wait, he will bide his time, and then as soon as you feel like you're safe on top of him, he just gets up. How many people do you know have the raw power to get up with another 230-pound muscular man on top of them? I don't know how he does it, but Blagoy Ivanov being a grappler is a perfect example. He just has the no fuck you stand-up defense to takedowns. He can be taken down. That's something that's a little bit of an issue in this particular fight. He doesn't always have the best gas tank. He slows down a lot, but he carries that power with him late into the rounds. As we saw in his win against Alexander Volkov, he won with literally 1 second on the clock at the end of a 15-minute brawl. So you can never count Derrick Lewis out of a fight. In this spot, he's going to be the bigger man. He's taking on Ilir Latifi, who is an undersized 205-pound fighter. He's a little tank. The Sledgehammer didn't have a good run at 205, and we faded him very, very well in the Volkan Oezdemir fight back in August. Volkan made quick work of Latifi. He had an absolute masterful performance and knocked him out like we knew he would in the second round. Latifi has been plagued by injuries. It's been a long-running storyline, and he only fought once in 2019, and that was the big KO loss. We've got to worry about his chin. Ever since Bader hit him with that knee back in 2016, he really just hasn't looked the same. He gets hurt and rocked all the time. He does fire back. He's got big, heavy power shots, and he's got big physical takedowns. However, at 205, that was something he could do. He could get under the legs of these guys that have kind of a taller, slimmer, skinnier build, and he just lifts them off the mat and slams them to the ground, and that's where he kind of made his size not matter as much. But now you're moving up the scale, buddy. You were taking on guys at 205 like Volkan Oezdemir who are going to be lightweights at heavyweight. I mean, I know that was a dumb way to say that, but you get my point. Derrick Lewis is huge. This guy is thick. Do you think Ilir Latifi can pick Derrick Lewis up over his head and put him on the mat? I don't think so. Now, granted, Lewis does have a bit of a problem with the takedowns. Latifi might be able to hit single legs and ankle picks on this kind of a guy, but Latifi is so small, Lewis is going to have no problem standing back up when that happens. And like I said, Derrick Lewis has that ability to just say, no, get off me and stand back up. He's got the crazy level of power. If Latifi's getting knocked out by 205ers, he's going to get knocked out by guys like the Black Beast. Even if this is another boring, slow decision, I think that Derrick Lewis is going to be the one landing the bigger, harder shots. So I do think that this price is relatively warranted. However, it looks like somebody disagrees with me. Money's coming in on Ilir Latifi. Derrick Lewis opened up at minus 265. You can get him around the minus 250 range right now, but it does look like he's as high as 280 in some spots. You can get plus 200, plus 220 on Ilir Latifi, and I almost put Derrick Lewis in my parlay. However, he's another one of these untrustworthy type of fighters. The way that he fights, we had Derrick Lewis against Alexander Volkov, and that was a saved by the bell last second KO. We knew he had that power. We knew he had that ability, and he was a big dog in that fight. That's where Derrick Lewis is best. When you can get him as a big, juicy underdog, he has those definite come from behind type of wins and has the ability to really close the skill gap by knocking people out with his insane power. You don't want to lay 3-1 on a guy like Derrick Lewis because of the way he fights. He averages 2.63 significant strikes per minute. However, he absorbs 2.29. And like I said, that's just the way that he fights. Even though he hits a whole lot harder than his opponents, he's running even with them when it comes to the significant strikes almost, because he just doesn't have that much output. Now, Ilir Latifi, when you flip this thing, averages 2.29 significant strikes per minute, and he absorbs 3.09. So that's where this is kind of our saving grace. If anyone's going to get hit more than Derrick Lewis, it's going to be Ilir Latifi. So I do think Derrick Lewis wins this fight. I think the price is a little out of control. I am not planning on touching it. If you want to take something like Derrick Lewis by KO, that's not necessarily the worst idea in the world. And Lewis inside the distance is minus 140. It's a little bit more wood than I would necessarily like to lay, but I don't know. I'm steering clear of this one. I'm going to be curious what they put the total out as, but I definitely am picking Derrick Lewis to win this one. So here we've got another really interesting fight. We're going back down the scales. We're going to go to featherweight where Mirsad Bektić returns to take on Dan Ige. And this is another fun fight. Really, really good spot. So Mirsad Bektić trains out of TriStar. He's 28 years old. He's 13-2. He's most recently coming off that bad loss against Josh Emmett. And the biggest thing that stands out about him is he's got a great porn star mustache. He's taking on Dan Ige, who we successfully landed a good solid bet on against Kevin Aguilar, who is 28 years old, 12-2. This is another very good stylistic matchup in my opinion. Let's talk about Bektić first, shall we? He doubles up on the jab, which is something you all know I love. He wings big, heavy power shots, and he has some seriously strong hips. He uses the cage well. He's got excellent balance, and his counter wrestling is second to none. It is very hard to take this man down. He also sees wrestling shots coming from a mile away. That was something that I noticed when I was watching his fight against Ricardo Lamas, is that every single time Ricardo Lamas shot in, Mirsad was able to read that and knew it was coming. He had his hips back. He was in the good defensive position and able to stuff every single one of those shots with ease. Like I said, he throws heavy shots. He's one of these guys that bites down on his mouthpiece every once in a while and throws heavy with big power. He throws 100% looking for that kill shot. And more often than not, it works for him. His right hand is his moneymaker. He's got serious power with that. He took out Godofredo Castro. If you haven't seen that one's fun. He punches him like in the chest. I'm not sure if he hits the chest or a floating rib, but somewhere in that ballpark, and puts him down with a body shot. It is seriously fun to watch. Now, he did have that bad fight with Darren Elkins back in 2017, where he basically whooped Elkins' ass for about 2.5 rounds. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Elkins decided that it was his time, and Bektić was tired, and he poured it on, and he ended up knocking Bektić out in the 3rd round. It really is the fight that put Darren Elkins on the map. He was not supposed to win that fight. He wasn't even close, and then he came through with this massive knockout. It was really awesome. An absolutely fun fight to watch. It reminded me of the Super Bowl, where you think one side's going to win for 90% of the game, and then boom, that's it. It's done. It's over, which is why we freaking love this sport. So he's had 2 bad knockout losses, one in 2017, one in 2019. He rebounded from the first one well. This is a guy that people were talking about being a title contender until very recently. Now, after having lost to Josh Emmett, who I personally am very high on, all of a sudden nobody thinks he's anywhere close to that. Josh Emmett has freakish power. He's one of these guys that hits way harder than any 145er has any right to be hitting. He could knock out an elephant down at that size. I don't know how he does it. So losing by knockout to him is not the worst case scenario. That knockout was all the way back in July, so he's taken a decent chunk of time off. We're all the way in February of 2020. I feel like he should have recovered from that knockout. Let's flip on over and talk about Dan Ige. He has relentless top control. This guy is an excellent, amazing grappler. He's got some serious ground and pound. If he gets you on the mat and he is on top of you, he will put you away. He also puts in really good effort on takedown defenses to reverse when he's on his back or on the ground. He sweeps well, he scrambles pretty well, and he is, however, content to accept the bottom position. And that's something that sometimes I can have a problem with, because if you're fighting a guy who wants to be on top and you're confident enough to sit on your back, you can get shut down. And if you're on your back the whole time, you're more than likely losing in the judge's eyes. So he will give up position in scrambles. He will stay on his back, but he does have some good striking on his feet as well. He rips the body with hooks, which is always something that we like to see. However, he does appear to slow down in round 3. Now, as high as I am on Dan Ige, I do think that he's a gem. I do think he's going to go a long way. He's had some decent UFC competition, but let's take a look. He comes off the Tuesday Night Contender Series. He loses his debut fight against Julio Arce, which is something that we always are looking to take our angle of winning or losing that first fight in the cage. So then he takes on Mike Santiago. Okay, he TKOs Mike Santiago. He takes on Jordan Griffin, wins that one. He fights Danny Henry, and then he wins against Kevin Aguilar. Let's take a look at those opponents. Mike Santiago is 22-13. He's been dropped from the UFC after going on a 3-fight losing streak, and he just lost outside of the cage. Jordan Griffin, the native psycho, is 17-7 and is currently riding a 2-fight losing streak, most recently to Chaz Skelly, who I'm not necessarily sold on, and I don't know if he has got a future with the promotion either. Danny the Hatchet Henry, he had 2 UFC wins against Hakeem Dawodu and Daniel Tamer, which that Hakeem win, that seemed a little fluky, but he lost to Dan Ige, and he is 12-3, so not that bad. He's pretty good. We're still not quite sure where he stands. Now, Kevin Aguilar, the Angel of Death, that's a guy who we're high on. We like this kid. He came off the Contender Series, has 2 UFC solid wins, and then lost a decision to Dan Ige. So the last couple of wins were credible. The first 2, not so much. So even though I like Dan Ige, and he's doing well, he's doing what he needs to, he's on the right path, he still has only fought guys that are 2 or 3 wins in the UFC, and coming off the Contender Series, we're not sure where he is in the upper echelon, whereas Mirsad Bektić, he's beating guys like Ricardo Lamas, which I know some people took that as, you better be beating Ricardo Lamas, but really Ricardo Lamas has only lost to Josh Emmett, Mirsad Bektić, and Calvin Kattar recently. He is in the twilight of his career. He is dipping, but those are still guys that I'm expecting big things from that he's lost to, and he KO'd the shit out of Darren Elkins when they fought, so he's still putting down those mid-tier fighters as well. I don't think that Dan Ige has the power to take out Bektić the way that Josh Emmett did. Now, if this fight gets dragged out into round 3 and Bektić gets tired, then maybe Dan Ige can win with some kind of ground and pound. But more often than not, I think that Bektić's wrestling ability is going to be what keeps this fight where he wants it. I think he's the harder hitter. I think he's faster. He's got better striking. And then he's going to just land heavier. And when he has the ability to force his opponents to play his game, he is a dangerous, dangerous man. His ability to defend the takedowns, I think, is going to remove Dan Ige's best weapon. My pick on this one, I'm going to go contrarian to a lot of my guys that do picks and videos and things like that as well. I know a lot of people who are putting their money on Dan Ige, but I really think this is a bounce back spot for Bektić. I think he's training out of an excellent, amazing gym in TriStar. They're going to know the game plan for a guy like Ige. They're going to know what they've got to do. He might even have to dig back down into his grappling roots and put Dan Ige on his back rather than going for a striking type of match here. But I think this is a spot where Bektić buckles down and really reminds everyone that he does in fact belong at the top of the division. And I don't like betting short favorites necessarily in these kinds of spots, but I think I'm going to have to here. He's at minus 129, and that's where we're going to lock him up. That's the lowest line we can get him. So we're going to go ahead and take Mirsad Bektić minus 129, and I'm going to hold my nose playing these little favorites. You know, the favorites all came through last week, so don't fail me now. If all these underdogs show up and kick our ass this week, I'm going to be a little upset. So let's go Bektić. We are sticking around with the big boys for the last non-title fight of the card. Juan Adams takes on Justin Tafa, and I'm sure if you listen to other podcasts and breakdown shows and things, this fight being at this spot on the card just makes absolutely no sense. I am not sure why it's the last fight of the night before we get to the main and co-main event, because both of these guys are coming off of losses, and I mean, really, they're low-level, big-time heavyweights, so not really sure. I mean, yeah, maybe it should be a fun fight, and that's kind of what they're looking for, but not sure. This is maybe one that belongs on like the ESPN Plus main card, something like that, not the pay-per-view card. But biggest thing that I can say here first is that I have a soft spot for Juan Adams. I'm a big fan of Juan the Kraken Adams, and I'm very much looking forward to his return here. He's 28 years old. He's 5-2. However, unfortunately, he's coming off of back-to-back losses. He fought Arjan Buller and lost a decision back in 2019, and then most recently, he had that embarrassing loss to Greg Hardy. Now, that's one where a lot of people are pissed off at him, but I kind of understand where he's coming from. He held on to Greg's leg, and he was kind of trying to wait out the storm, and he wasn't moving. That was really all it came down to, is that he was not moving, and the way Greg hits, everyone assumes you are out cold, but to me, that just backs up the fact that Juan has got a head made out of brick, because he wasn't rocked. He stood right up as soon as the fight got stopped, and he was like, why'd you stop it? That was just a bad fight IQ situation. It was a guy who is not ready to be at the top level of MMA being thrown in a big spot against a named fighter who the UFC is looking to push. So I understand what happened there, and he has completely overhauled everything since then. He got into MMA just to kind of stay in shape and kind of lose some weight, that kind of thing, and then he got thrown into fighting because he's a big-ass dude that can hit really hard, and of course, he was knocking people out in the first round left and right, because that's what happens when you get a stellar heavyweight like this fighting other low-level heavyweights on the regional scene. So Juan has a rocket ship start to his MMA career, finds his way to the UFC stage probably way too early, but now he's doing the right things to get on track, and that's what I'm looking forward to. He went out of Jackson Wink, which there's a couple of other gyms that I personally probably would have picked for him, but Jackson Wink is definitely still one of the top gyms in the world. He's going to get good coaching there. He'll get good strategy there. He'll get good work on cardio. There's good, solid bodies for him to work with there, and that was a big thing before, is he didn't have training partners that could match his size or really give him any kind of a look. So I'm expecting a very, very improved version of Juan Adams here. So it doesn't do us a whole lot of good to go over what we saw, because I think he's going to be a completely different fighter. He does have good hand speed. He does work his jab, which I always like to see. He mixes in leg kicks. He's another one of these surprisingly athletic guys for his size. And he does use good body lock takedowns, and he utilizes the trip very well, which I think at heavyweight is a half decent strategy, because a lot of these big boys can't hold up once they get tipped over. It's just all heavyweight. We're going down, baby. So Justin Tafa, the bad man, fighting out of Australia. He's one of Mark Hunt's boys. We took him incorrectly against Yorgan De Castro back in October. Like I said, that's a spot where normally speaking, I will just take the heavyweight that I feel like has more power, or whichever one is the bigger dog. So when we hit that line on Justin Tafa, he was the underdog, and I thought that he was going to have an edge in power. However, Yorgan De Castro proved to be the real thing. He was able to slip out of the way. He frustrated Tafa, and then he caught Tafa rushing in trying to end the fight, landed a big bomb and dropped him like a sack of potatoes. So Justin Tafa is coming back from an October knockout, a really bad knockout. I mean, he got knocked out clean, and he's coming back just a couple months later to fight Juan Adams, who is a volume speed power puncher who should have a wrestling advantage as well. So I think Juan Adams is going to come out here. He's going to be able to keep Juan on the outs. He's going to be able to keep Justin on the outside of his jab, and then he can either land a big shot himself, or I think he'll just be able to land a body lock trip takedown, or even at this point, hopefully something like a double leg or a single leg, put Tafa on the mat, and Tafa's got no ground game. Once we're on the mat, Juan should have no problem holding him down and just kind of roughing him up from there. However, if he can't get the finish, this thing could get sloppy real quick. You know, they could be going to the second and third round and laying on each other because these are big boys. And so this is one that my heart says Juan Adams, my brain says Juan Adams, but because of what we have seen recently, I can't in good conscience tell anybody to put money on him. I love the guy. I hope he's listening to the show. Juan Adams came on the Die Hard MMA podcast, and he was my first fighter interview. He was the first guy to give us a shot and say, you know what, I'll come on your little dinky show that nobody listens to and give you some of my time, and I really appreciate that. And because of that, he's earned a lifelong fan no matter what happens in the cage. So I am notably biased about this one, which is another reason why I'm staying off of it. This is a spot where I absolutely hate the line. I hate the line, because after that full breakdown, I would love to tell you to go out there and bet Juan Adams, because I do think he's going to win this fight, but he's a minus 240 favorite. So you're telling me a guy coming off of 2 losses, a guy who just turned his life upside down and is training hard for the first time, we're going to trust him at minus 245? From a betting perspective, it doesn't make sense. We can't bet on our boy Juan Adams in this case, even though I think that he more than likely gets it done. Now, Tafa, if you want to take a shot on him as a big fat underdog, I don't blame you, because that's the reason I bet him in the first place. Dude's got insane power. He really does. So there is always that chance that he could clip Juan. Now, like I said, I think that Juan's got a head full of bricks, so I don't know that he's going to be able to knock him out clean. But in those later rounds, if they're both tired and a little bit sloppy, anything can happen. One thing that you might look at, Adams inside the distance, if you must have action on this fight, is minus 120, which, like I said, I think that is a pretty good possibility that he gets on the ground and finishes it that way. But I'm staying clear of this one. I'm staying clear away from this one, and I'm going to tip my fireball cup to my boy Juan Adams and scream my face off for the Kraken as he makes his walk out to the cage. The pick is Juan Adams. We're passing from a betting perspective. We have reached the co-main event. We've got a women's flyweight fight where Valentina Shevchenko, the Bullet, is defending her title against Katlyn, blonde fighter Chookagian, another contender for maybe the worst MMA name in history. I don't know how you come up with blonde fighter and feel like that strikes fear in the hearts of your opponents. So Katlyn Chookagian has left the UFC. No choice. She is the women's version of John Fitch. She goes out there and she wins. Her fights are bad, but she gets it done, and that W next to her name, her 13-2 record, has earned her a shot against the Bullet. And you know what? Valentina's got to fight somebody, right? People keep getting derailed with upsets left and right. They don't have a clear number one contender. Katlyn Chookagian's basically all the UFC had, and that's why we got this. So this is not a spectacular fight, in my opinion. Valentina belongs on the women's memorial for the greatest of all time. She is one of the best there's ever been. I would love to see a third fight between her and Nunes. Those 2 fights were so phenomenal. Round 3, dear God, I hope we get it at some time. She's on a 4-fight win streak currently and has just absolutely sealed herself as the champion of this division, and no one's going to touch her for a long time. She's incredible on the ground. She's way more athletic and explosive than most of these women. She's got a sick submission game. She hits really, really hard. She's an excellent counter fighter. She knows when to be aggressive. She works well on the cage. I mean, anything in MMA that you're supposed to be able to do well, she does. She's incredible. That's it. Bottom line. Katlyn Chookagian on the flip side of this thing, we've talked about how she wins on the judges' scorecards. She does a lot of air striking. She's got high volume. She scores well. She kiosks. She gets the judges' attention. And that kind of a fighting style, it's just not going to be enough for someone like Valentina. However, this kind of a fighter fights right into Valentina's game plan, because Valentina has nothing to worry about. Chookagian has 2 knockout wins, 1 submission, and then 10 decisions. She can't hurt anybody. She could not pop a grape if she wanted to. She will not stand any chance of knocking out Valentina Shevchenko, and she has even less of a chance of submitting Valentina Shevchenko. The only way Katlyn Chookagian can win this fight is by out-voluming the champion and staying away from her and running and hoping that she can still somehow manage to win on the judges' scorecards. That is a very, very difficult thing to do, and it's a very hard game plan to come in there with, because you've got to be able to avoid your opponent's strikes while still landing your own enough for the judges to say, yeah, I think she got that one. That's going to be difficult when Valentina comes back with leg and body head kicks, lots of serious power punches, the ability to take you to the ground. I just don't see how Chookagian has any shot in this fight. And the problem is, I don't know that Valentina is going to be able to finish it either. So, if you want to take a look at maybe taking this thing inside the distance, tanking Valentina Shevchenko to win by some kind of finish, I mean, go for it. It's a 5-rounder, so there's always that chance that she'll be able to get it. If it hits the ground, I think that Valentina can submit her. However, I don't think that Valentina is gonna be able to, or not that she's not gonna be able to, but I don't know that she wants to. So Valentina's got 6 decisions on her record as well, and if you look back at like her fight with Joanna, her fight with Liz, those both went to 5-round decisions, and her 2 fights with Nunes went to decision. If you're gonna stand and strike with her, she is more than willing to stand and strike with you. So if Chookagian has no interest in the ground, I don't necessarily know that Valentina is gonna come out here with a plan of wrestling, take her down, get her on the mat right away. They are probably going to stare at each other. She's probably going to try to play the counter game and just land the heavier shots. And Chookagian is durable enough. She is good enough. She's also elusive enough that I don't know that Valentina is going to land the kill shot. I think Valentina may actually engage in a point striking type of contest here and then just win a very underwhelming and boring long-term decision. Valentina wins by 5-round decision is -125, and really that's the only line that I could possibly look at here. I don't like it enough to actually bet it, because we do know the type of firepower that Shevchenko brings to the table. If you give her a neck, if you give her an arm, it will be over. However, she can also land that damn head kick, which those are, let's be honest, those are few and far between. She is capable of winning by knockout, but I actually think that that's the only knockout of her UFC career. Yes, it is. So at this level, that's actually the only knockout she's ever landed in the UFC. So I'm not expecting a knockout. Maybe a submission, but Chookagian is no stranger to the ground, and she also likes a standing fight as well. I think this one's going to be a point fight. If you must have something, play that 125 on Shevchenko by decision, because that's really the way that I think it's going to go. And inside the distance, you're only getting plus 155, so it's not really even that juicy to take that kind of a shot on it. If you want to look for the submission-specific prop, that's really kind of the only other way I feel like I would look, because the knockout is a little, like I said, I just kind of don't see that happening. Shevchenko winning by submission is plus 420. Light them up, boys. So, I mean, that one's a little bit better, but again, I don't necessarily know that I see that happening. If you want to parlay her, she's minus 1100. This is one of those ones that there's just no way. If you see a fighter who's gonna come in and upset a minus 1100 favorite, they've got to have that fast twitch knockout ability. They've got to have that submission ability. They've got to have an edge somewhere. Upsets happen. They do. This is one of those fights where it won't. Need I remind you that this is a Jon Jones fight card?
Quit eating all the goddamn cocaine!
And that, ladies and gentlemen, will bring us to your main event of the evening. We've got a light heavyweight matchup for the belt. The GOAT, the greatest of all time, the best fighter we have more than likely ever seen in the cage, Jon freaking Bones Jones, is taking on Dominick the Devastator Reyes. Now, this is one where I shouldn't have to tell you a whole lot about Jon Jones. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I want to get you up to speed on this man. He is someone who I was insanely jealous of for a long time, because we are the same age, and he was the youngest UFC champion that there has ever been while I sat on the couch eating Cheetos. So Jon Jones is absolutely phenomenal. He took the UFC by storm, and realistically, that one loss was a disqualification and probably shouldn't be there. So he has done a lot of things. I'm not a fan of Jon Jones as a human being, But as a fighter, you have to marvel at what he does and what he's capable of. He's amazing everywhere. He's an incredible wrestler. He's a great striker. And he really just has an absolute cheat code with his body type. He is so long. He is so rangy and so tall. He can do things to people that other people cannot simply because of that physical advantage. Dominick Reyes is really the one that we need to focus on here. He's only 2 years younger than John, but he's 12-0. He's very, very young in his MMA career, comparatively speaking. His whole thing is he's been throwing out, no one has ever been an athlete like me. And I got to tell you, I'm a side with Bones on this one. I think that's some bullshit. He's fought guys like Olympic wrestler Daniel Cormier, Alexander Gustafsson, Anthony Smith, Thiago Santos. I mean, yes, Glover Teixeira was old, but he's fucking athletic. Vitor Belfort, maybe one of the most athletic people the UFC has ever seen. Lyoto Machida, one of the fastest. Quentin Rampage Jackson in his prime. Rashad Evans in his prime. Ryan Bader. Don't give me that first and only athlete you've ever fought shit. I'm sorry, but that is crap. So Dominick stormed on the UFC as well, and I was one of the I was also one of the people who saw him and went, oh, this kid may be the one to give Jon Jones trouble. There were a lot of us that were saying that after he got onto the UFC stage. He came in and he won his first couple of fights very impressively, 2 knockouts and a submission. And we were already talking about this guy going up to challenge Jones right away. And we kind of needed to pump the brakes there a little bit. He took on our boy Volkan No Time Oezdemir. And I know there's a bit of a narrative floating around out there that he didn't train with his normal team. He had a bad camp. He was kind of out of his way. And, everyone has down fights. Everyone has bad fights. Maybe that's true. But he won a very hairy split decision over Volkan Oezdemir, who we know is not on the level of Jon Jones. Then he gets Chris Weidman. And Chris Weidman is a washed-up 185-pounder who has no business being in the UFC and definitely has no business fighting a power puncher of this caliber when his chin is completely shot. Chris Weidman probably should retire, much less be fighting a 205er. We cashed in big when Dominick Reyes took out Chris Weidman because that was one of the easiest picks I've ever made. And I don't know how that somehow makes you worthy of fighting Jon Jones. I mean, winning a very close, bad decision over Volkan and then knocking out an inflated 185er with a busted chin and Chris sends you up the title and now you're ready to take on the best in the world. I know we've got a short list of contenders at 205. I know right now there's really nobody else to throw in there, so that's really why he's getting the shot. But he hasn't proven himself really over anybody. He's fought Jared Cannonier, who he's very impressive at 185, had no business fighting at 205 or heavyweight. He fought Ovince St. Preux, who is one of the biggest up and down fighters that we have ever seen and is definitely not title contender worthy. He fought Volkan Oezdemir, who while I'm high on him and he's going to be a great gatekeeper, he doesn't belong at the title either. And then Chris Weidman. There's a huge difference between Jon Jones and the rest of the pack at 205. This script is written. We're getting maybe the best price we've ever seen on Jon Jones because people believe in the power of Dominick Reyes. Now, I took a flyer on Thiago Santos the last time Jon Jones fought, and I'm really kicking myself here because I said that Jon Jones more than likely was going to win a decision, and he was a big, fat, juicy underdog line on the prop for him to win by decision, but instead, I went ahead and threw a couple shekels on Thiago to win because I wanted to believe in that knockout power, and I've got a personal vendetta against Jon Jones. So I didn't want to bet on him. I bet on Thiago. I liked the plus 300-ish number with a guy that's got that kind of power, and it was a good fight, and I wonder what it would have looked like if his knees hadn't gotten blown out, because he was in that fight. Dominick, though, I don't think that he really stands much of a chance. Now, everyone stands a shot in MMA, don't get me wrong, but this is the GOAT we're talking about. Everybody that's ever stood a chance has failed against Jon Jones. Not a lot of people go undefeated in their careers, just Khabib and Jon Jones. So until something happens, until someone shows up, like when Anderson Silva's leg broke, I'm not betting against him until I've got a very good reason to do so. I actually have a sleepy pick. I've got a very creepy feeling that I know who might be the guy to take out Jon Jones, and it's not somebody that you would be expecting. Needless to say, I could have cashed in on Bones the last couple of times, and I messed up. I was wrong, and I missed. And Jon Jones may be fired up. For some reason, Dominick Reyes has gotten under his skin. Jon Jones is pissed off. But really, I'm not sure who said it. It might have been Luke Thomas. or maybe it was my boys over at the Dogger Pass podcast, but Jon Jones is a decision machine. Back in 2013, Gustafsson, Teixeira, Cormier, St. Preux, those were all by decision, all right? And then he faces DC, and that's when he was hyped up on more than likely all the performance-enhancing drugs, and he blasts DC with a head kick from hell. He takes on Alexander Gustafsson, and Gus is shot to bits. So he gets knocked out in the third round. And really, I think that was more of the durability of Gus than it was the ability of Jon Jones. Then Anthony Smith, then Thiago Santos. I think Jon Jones is capable of winning by finish because we've seen him do it before. He can do it. But more often than not, Jon Jones likes to play with his food. We've seen it time and time and time again. Jon Jones is the Bill Belichick of MMA. And if you don't know football, what I'm saying is Bill Belichick is known for taking away weapons. Jon Jones gets in there and he can see the matrix. Every time he's fighting somebody, he knows exactly what's coming. It takes him about a round to get adjusted to them. And once he does, he systematically removes your weapons from you. So someone like Dominick Reyes, who is relatively one-dimensional, is going to be easy pickings for Jon Jones to just remove what he does best. If he has a counter or if he has an ability to move to take away the best weapon of Dominick Reyes, he'll find it. And he'll find it in about the first 2 minutes. And then Dominick is going to be a fish out of water. He'll be fighting with weapons that are less than effective. His go-to punches, his go-to moves, they're not going to be there. And Jon is just going to make him feel terrible. Jon is going to do his very best to demoralize Reyes, and unless Reyes quits, or unless Reyes offers up some kind of a submission, I think Jon is going to be content to kick his ass from bell to bell. Jon Jones likes his opponents knowing that there's no way they can win. He likes to sit there and kick their legs and kick their body and just kind of rough them up, giving them no option to get out of the fight. Jon Jones is a bully, and he's kind of a dick. I absolutely can see him cornering Reyes and not hitting him hard enough for Reyes to get, called by the ref or TKO'd or slumped down. Just hitting him enough to let him know, I can end this at any time, but you're not getting out, and take him the full 25. That's really how I see this fight going. Right now, Jon Jones, inside the distance, is minus 120. I'm going to take a flyer on Jon Jones by 5-round decision. It's at plus 230 right now. I kind of goofed up here. He was at plus 250 just a couple of days ago, and I was hoping I was going to get a little bit more on that. I thought maybe 260, 270, but it looks like some other people are thinking the same way I am, and it's come down just a little bit. So I messed up there. I missed out on 20 cents, but we're going to go ahead and throw a unit on Jon Jones at plus 230 to win this thing by decision. Shout out to my boys on Twitter. We were talking about that Jon Jones bet, and I told you to tune into the show. There you go, buddy. That's where it's at, Danny. We're going to go with Jon Jones by 5-round decision for our main event action. Let's recap them picks. Thank you for sticking with me to the end here, ladies and gentlemen. We are kicking our night off by betting on Miles Johns at minus 125. We are going to parlay Alex the Great White Morono and Andrea KGB Lee. That parlay is minus 125, and we are going to hit it twice. We're going to double up on that one, laying 2.5 to win 2. Then we're going to take another short favorite with Mirsad Bektić. We're looking for a bounce back at minus 129. Finally, we are going to stretch it all the way to the main event where we take Jon Jones, the greatest of all time, to win by decision at plus 230. Thank you all for sticking with me. Give me a follow over at the Die Hard MMA Pod on Twitter. You can see all the links and things in the description below. If you enjoy the show, if I give you some kind of a tip or information that you go with on a bet, tips are always appreciated. They're never expected, but I will put my PayPal info down there. Do me a favor. Let's get the word about the show out. Give me a like. Give me a retweet, share this thing on Reddit, tell your buddy at work about the Die Hard MMA podcast, and let's blow this damn thing up. Let's talk to you all soon. Good luck this weekend. Let's roll.